마른, 얇은.
thin.
thin.
나는 말랐어.
I'm thin. I'm thin.
나는 말랐어.
I'm thin. I'm thin.
나는 마르지 않았어.
I'm not thin. I'm not thin.
나는 마르지 않았어.
I'm not thin. I'm not thin.
너는 말랐어.
You're thin. You're thin.
너는 말랐어.
You're thin. You're thin.
너는 마르지 않았어.
You're not thin. You're not thin.
너는 마르지 않았어.
You're not thin. You're not thin.
그는 말랐어.
He's thin. He's thin.
그는 말랐어.
He's thin. He's thin.
그는 마르지 않았어.
He's not thin. He's not thin.
그는 마르지 않았어.
He's not thin. He's not thin.
그녀는 말랐어.
She's thin. She's thin.
그녀는 말랐어.
She's thin. She's thin.
그녀는 마르지 않았어.
She's not thin. She's not thin.
그녀는 마르지 않았어.
She's not thin. She's not thin.
탐은 말랐어.
Tom is thin. Tom is thin.
탐은 말랐어.
Tom is thin. Tom is thin.
탐은 마르지 않았어.
Tom isn't thin. Tom isn't thin.
탐은 마르지 않았어.
Tom isn't thin. Tom isn't thin.
케이트는 말랐어.
Kate is thin. Kate is thin.
케이트는 말랐어.
Kate is thin. Kate is thin.
케이트는 마르지 않았어.
Kate isn't thin. Kate isn't thin.
케이트는 마르지 않았어.
Kate isn't thin. Kate isn't thin.
우리 엄마는 말랐어.
My mom is thin. My mom is thin.
우리의 엄마는 말랐어.
My mom is thin. My mom is thin.
우리 엄마는 마르지 않았어.
My mom isn't thin. My mom isn't thin.
우리의 엄마는 마르지 않았어.
My mom isn't thin. My mom isn't thin.
우리 아빠는 말랐어.
My dad is thin. My dad is thin.
우리의 아빠는 말랐어.
My dad is thin. My dad is thin.
우리 아빠는 마르지 않았어.
My dad isn't thin. My dad isn't thin.
우리의 아빠는 마르지 않았어.
My dad isn't thin. My dad isn't thin.
우리 언니는 말랐어.
My sister is thin. My sister is thin.
우리 누나는 말랐어.
My sister is thin. My sister is thin.
우리 언니는 마르지 않았어.
My sister isn't thin. My sister isn't thin.
우리 누나는 마르지 않았어.
My sister isn't thin. My sister isn't thin.
우리 오빠는 말랐어.
My brother is thin. My brother is thin.
우리 형은 말랐어.
My brother is thin. My brother is thin.
우리 오빠는 마르지 않았어.
My brother isn't thin. My brother isn't thin.
우리 형은 마르지 않았어.
My brother isn't thin. My brother isn't thin.
우리 이모는 말랐어.
My aunt is thin. My aunt is thin.
우리 이모는 말랐어.
My aunt is thin. My aunt is thin.
우리 이모는 마르지 않았어.
My aunt isn't thin. My aunt isn't thin.
우리 이모는 마르지 않았어.
My aunt isn't thin. My aunt isn't thin.
우리 삼촌은 말랐어.
My uncle is thin. My uncle is thin.
우리 삼촌은 말랐어.
My uncle is thin. My uncle is thin.
우리 삼촌은 마르지 않았어.
My uncle isn't thin. My uncle isn't thin.
우리 삼촌은 마르지 않았어.
My uncle isn't thin. My uncle isn't thin.
우리 아내는 말랐어.
My wife is thin. My wife is thin.
우리 아내는 말랐어.
My wife is thin. My wife is thin.
우리 아내는 마르지 않았어.
My wife isn't thin. My wife isn't thin.
우리 아내는 마르지 않았어.
My wife isn't thin. My wife isn't thin.
우리 남편은 말랐어.
My husband is thin. My husband is thin.
우리 남편은 말랐어.
My husband is thin. My husband is thin.
우리 남편은 마르지 않았어.
My husband isn't thin. My husband isn't thin.
우리 남편은 마르지 않았어.
My husband isn't thin. My husband isn't thin.
나의 여자친구는 말랐어.
My girlfriend is thin. My girlfriend is thin.
나의 여자친구는 말랐어.
My girlfriend is thin. My girlfriend is thin.
나의 여자친구는 마르지 않았어.
My girlfriend isn't thin. My girlfriend isn't thin.
나의 여자친구는 마르지 않았어.
My girlfriend isn't thin. My girlfriend isn't thin.
나의 남자친구는 말랐어.
My boyfriend is thin. My boyfriend is thin.
나의 남자친구는 말랐어.
My boyfriend is thin. My boyfriend is thin.
나의 남자친구는 마르지 않았어.
My boyfriend isn't thin. My boyfriend isn't thin.
나의 남자친구는 마르지 않았어.
My boyfriend isn't thin. My boyfriend isn't thin.
나의 사촌은 말랐어.
My cousin is thin. My cousin is thin.
나의 사촌은 말랐어.
My cousin is thin. My cousin is thin.
나의 사촌은 마르지 않았어.
My cousin isn't thin. My cousin isn't thin.
나의 사촌은 마르지 않았어.
My cousin isn't thin. My cousin isn't thin.
그것은 얇아.
It's thin. It's thin.
그것은 얇아.
It's thin. It's thin.
그것은 얇지 않아.
It's not thin. It's not thin.
그것은 얇지 않아.
It's not thin. It's not thin.
이것은 얇아.
This is thin. This is thin.
이것은 얇아.
This is thin. This is thin.
이것은 얇지 않아.
This is not thin. This is not thin.
이것은 얇지 않아?
This is not thin. This is not thin.
저것은 얇아.
That is thin. That is thin.
저것은 얇아.
That is thin. That is thin.
저것은 얇지 않아.
That is not thin. That is not thin.
저것은 얇지 않아?
That is not thin. That is not thin.
그것들은 얇아.
They're thin. They're thin.
그것들은 얇아.
They're thin. They're thin.
그것들은 얇지 않아.
They're not thin. They're not thin.
그것들은 얇지 않아?
They're not thin. They're not thin.
이것들은 얇아.
These are thin. These are thin.
이것들은 얇아.
These are thin. These are thin.
이것들은 얇지 않아.
These are not thin. These are not thin.
이것들은 얇지 않아?
These are not thin. These are not thin.
저것들은 얇아.
Those are thin. Those are thin.
저것들은 얇아.
Those are thin. Those are thin.
저것들은 얇지 않아.
Those are not thin. Those are not thin.
저것들은 얇지 않아?
Those are not thin. Those are not thin.